Howdy friends, and welcome back to the channel. In today's video, I am going to talk to you about a permaculture concept called herb spirals. I am out on my newly rebuilt front walkway. I could not be happier with how this turned out. And one of the things that we did is we took two existing herb spirals. I wish I had taken before pictures. And we transformed it into one large herb spiral. And so I want to talk to you about why you may want to have one, what some of the benefits are, what are some of the things that I didn't quite do exactly to permaculture code. And first, I actually just want to show you how awesome this project turned out. First, a tiny bit of background. When we moved here, there was the long driveway that you see behind me, and then there was also a U-shaped driveway. The previous owners had not had gravel dumped or had it dealt with in probably close to 15 years. So you could kind of tell there was a U-shaped driveway, but not really. And we really wanted to be able to utilize most of this property, at least the front part, because this is our southern exposure. And so we actually got rid of the U driveway. And because of that, we had a lot of what was called clean fill. Not so clean. And we were on a budget. We were brand new homeowners. And I constructed our first front walkway with patio pavers, the stones that we had just found lying around the property. They had them everywhere. I didn't pay for a single one of these. When I turned the camera around, the design is very similar. But then I filled it with the clean fill stuff. Anywho, that was a big mistake. I'm planning on doing a video about, we're 6 years into this property now, and what have we learned, right? What would we do differently? We've been doing this small scale homesteading thing for a while now. What are some of the things that we would share with our friends at home, right? Anywho, as the years progressed, the pathway just looked worse and worse. It was filled with weeds all the time, and it may surprise you to learn, but I am not a wild garden kind of person. I do like things neat and tidy, but I don't have a gardener. I actually just talked about this on Instagram. You know, I love the idea of like an English cottage garden, but I lack the gardener that's been with the family for generations. I don't have one of those. It's just me. So I really wanted something that was beautiful and low maintenance. So now I'm actually going to turn the camera around and show you what we created. So as I'm filming this, I will share some in-progress pictures. We have decided, after years and years of trying cardboard, of painstakingly pulling up sod, we've tried landscaping fabric, we have tried friends, everything, and we have become a tarp family. We have a lot of invasive thistles and weeds that spread by rhizome that just take over and choke out everything. And it really just became the best solution for us. So how do you make something like tarp work when you have stone? Let me show you. So this is our gibungus gravel pile. And this is a bit of an aside, but hey, might be useful for you. And if you look closely, yes, there is stone, but what they actually did for us when they delivered is this is a mixture of what they call crusher run and then 3/4 inch stone. And so when you mix the crusher run in with it, that absorbs all the water. And I should know, we just had about 50 millimeters of rain in the last few days. We did not have any flooding or pooling. So that is how we get around it. But we built two of these 3-tiered garden boxes. And this is what we're here to talk about today, the herb spiral. Okay, so herb spirals are essentially a really clever way of creating a bunch of different microclimates in a compact space. And so our first herb spiral that we ever built, I'm going to see if I can dig up some old photos. If I do, I will overlay them on this. was when we lived in a small rental townhouse in Oshawa. We had a teeny tiny backyard, but we wanted to be able to grow as much as we could, but we still had a small space. So what is essentially 5 feet in diameter, okay? So 5 feet across, and that number is about what you're shooting for 4 or 5 feet, because you want to be able to reach the center of your herb spiral without having to like heave yourself over or crush anything else. You have about 25 feet of growing space, which is absolutely amazing. There's no way I'd be able to grow as many plants in just a circle that was 5 feet in diameter. But essentially, what you're doing is you're creating different growing zones, or at least little microclimates. So the plants that are at the top of your herb spiral are your plants that need a lot of drainage, that like a hot, dry kind of climate. So this is things like rosemary, thyme, and oregano. And as you see with some of the overlay filming that I did, we decided to put our oregano and thyme in our side beds here. But that's okay, you don't have to do that. I've got a teeny tiny rosemary on the top of ours. And then as you move further down the spiral, I want you to think about the plants that would maybe need a little bit of shade. So the things that are along the back there, as your plants up front get larger, will be shaded. And then everything at the bottom of the herb spiral is where you're going to have damper soil and more fragile type plants. Now, traditionally here in the Northern Hemisphere, I've actually oriented my herb spiral incorrectly. I did that on purpose because I wanted it to look a certain way. Normally, what we would have done is had it flipped the other way. So that opening part at the bottom would have been north facing, and that would have meant all of those plants not only have damp soil because it's down near the bottom, but a cooler climate. So I just kind of plant things a little bit differently. You can follow the permaculture concept or you don't have to. It really doesn't matter. You have to work with what, kind of what you want to create, but also within the confines of your property. So for me, the aesthetic of having it shaped a certain way trumped having it what most people would look like. I think is backwards. But this is probably my 5th herb spiral now, and I've oriented them a bunch of different ways, and they've all worked. Traditionally, too, there's normally a pond at the bottom, which would then feed the water source, the wetter plants at the bottom too. But standing water on a property that already has gibungus mosquitoes, no thanks. Placement for your herb spiral is going to greatly depend on what it is you're growing. So here we have mostly culinary herbs. I've got a little tiny baby dill at the bottom there. I've got some chives, a little baby parsley, a basil. Now this is a sage plant that I dug up from another bed, so it of course is much bigger and doing a lot happier. There's some marjoram, I've got some lemongrass, and then rosemary. And I'll probably dot in either some annual flowers or things here. So this is mostly a culinary herb spiral. So for me, in terms of permaculture, I want this in what is called my zone 1. I want this right off my kitchen because I'm going to be cooking with these plants. And so in permaculture concepts, there are different zones, and the things that you need to access quickly or directly off of the house, i.e. things like culinary herbs, would be close to your kitchen and right close to your home, ideally. But of course, when you're building a herb spiral, you also have to think about sun exposure. So most of these plants are going to require at least 6 hours of sunlight. So if right off your kitchen is shady, you may have to kind of think a little bit outside of the box. My front porch, like that window that's there, that is my kitchen. So I literally just pop out the front door and I'm right here. So this is, for me, a perfect location. As for what you want to grow in your herb spiral, you got a lot of options. I have always tended to do culinary herbs. That's just been what I've always done. That's what a lot of people do. But if you're growing things in a small space, you can start to grow food here as well. Think about your crops that really like hot temperatures, hot and dry, like peppers, eggplants. Those can grow up top, right? And so you can grow food in these. I've seen some people who've just done either perennial or annual flowers or a mixture of the two. So it really depends on what you want. If you're going to be harvesting from it on a fairly regular basis, I do encourage you to have it in that zone 1 as close to your house as possible. So that way you're not huffing it all the way to the back of the property to go get a little bit of dill. you know, for your potato salad, right? You want that close to your house if possible. So now we're going to talk about construction of your herb spiral and what kind of materials you can use. As you can see, we used bricks. Now, bricks tend to be my preference. I have built them from like rough edge stone that I have found around the property. I have built them with wood logs. I've done quite a few different things. Wood rots, so that's my number one thing with that one. Bricks you can often find for free. Every herb spiral I have ever built out of bricks, I found bricks for free either on Facebook Marketplace or, this will age me here, my first herb spiral I found my bricks off of Kijiji. I think people still use Kijiji. That is, of course, an option, but you can really use anything you want. What I like about bricks is they make it easier to create the design that I like because they're all uniform in size and shape. Therefore, it's easier to keep your herb spiral level. However, I have seen some really magical herb spirals made out of stones. I've even seen some made out of old bottles. For me, I really wanted that height that you can see, so bricks helped me achieve that as well. I've seen some cool ones built out of wood. I say use the material that you're most comfortable with, what you can source inexpensively, and what you're, what you like to look at. What kind of aesthetic are you going for? Okay, so here's some tips and tricks that I have learned along the way. When you are filling your herb spiral, as you can imagine, this beast, if I had filled this just with triple mix of soil, would have used a lot of dirt. Like a lot. More than I wanted to spend money on. And so when you're building a structure this big, and you can do this with raised garden beds as well, you can kind of incorporate some permaculture techniques and start to fill the bottom of your structures with other materials that you have. So the first thing we did is we had a really nice big layer of rocks at the bottom that's going to help with drainage. Then we had a whole bunch of pieces of firewood that were just way too big for our firebox. Those ones went right down the center, and they're going to rot and turn into soil over time, which was great. My neighbor also had a bunch of old rotting logs too. They were already rotting, which was perfect. And so we did a really big layer of that. And then on top of that is where we put our triple mix. We also let it settle for a few days, especially after some rain, because when you're putting things like stones and rocks at the bottom and you're putting logs, there's air pockets, there's gaps, right? And so your soil inevitably is going to settle. So I wanted to see how much it was going to settle, and then I topped up. So that's one of my money-saving tricks for you is don't fill that whole sucker with dirt, especially if you want kind of a statement piece, like when you walk up like mine, you want it nice and tall, find other materials to fill your herb spiral with before you put in the soil. Next, like I said, you can really grow anything you want, but I would absolutely avoid anything in the mint family. So I know, and you'll see them, you'll look up herb spiral designs, and so many of them have things like lemon balm and mint, and I'm like, friends, if what you want is an entire herb spiral full of lemon balm and mint, have at her, you can do that. But if you think that you're then also going to be able to grow sage and rosemary and thyme and oregano and chives and dill, you've got another thing coming, because those plants are invasive. So I would avoid those at all costs. Also think outside the box. There's nothing to say that your herb spiral can't be a mix of annuals and perennial flowers, pollinators attracting them to your property, as well as vegetables and culinary herbs and medicinal herbs. There's a lot of options here. I'm probably going to plop in a few chamomiles and a few other things in this herb spiral too, because you can really pack it in and fill them up nicely. If you go all perennial, it's amazing what this will look like in a few years if I went all with perennials. So those are my biggest tricks. Don't just fill it with dirt unless you got a whole lot of money to burn on dirt. Then, hey, you do you. And please, unless you want an entire herb spiral filled with mint, I would avoid anything in the mint family. All right, there you have it, friends. A brief introduction to the permaculture concept known as herb spirals. A fantastic way to grow a lot of things in a small space. And not only that, they're really, really beautiful, if I do say so myself. As I mentioned, I'm not an expert. My herb spiral is not perfectly adhering to all of the rules of herb spirals, because I did choose to orient mine slightly differently, but it's pretty darn close. Now, if you do have questions, I'm happy to help if I can. You know what to do. Leave those in the comments below. If you like this video, I always appreciate a thumbs up and a subscribe to the channel. That helps the YouTube algorithm to show my videos to other people, which is always amazing for small channels like mine. And until next time, this is Corinne from Spiraea Herbs, wishing you health and wellness.